Hello everyone. So you might or might not know this, but I'm in a bit of a different location. I'm in my bedroom today for this Friday reads because yesterday our upstairs neighbor's pipe broke, and my office, which is where I normally film, well, there's water coming out of the walls, there was water coming out of the lamp. So it's a bit of a mess. So yeah, I'm filming from here today. I hope it's still okay. But yeah, with all that fun aside, I wanted to talk to you about the books that I read this week. So yeah, the first book that I finished this week was actually an audiobook that I started listening to last week, and it's The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. I have already talked about this a bit last week, but it's basically about the feelings of James Baldwin about racism, connecting especially with religion, and I thought it was really interesting. I didn't know or think so deeply about all these things, and I really love to hear about his perspective on this. So yeah, that was great, and I finished it. The second thing that I finished during the weekend was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, and this was kind of a thriller police procedural thing. So basically there was this event in which there was like a submarine that it was used to use pressure to try to help patients with different things like autism or infertility. Most of them were kids, but not all of them. And it exploded at some point because one of the oxygen lines going into the submarine caught fire. And basically a year later from that event, there's a case trying to figure out what happened and who did it. And yeah, so there are different people involved. There is the family that owns the submarine, and they are from Korean descent, so there is also racism and things in that. There is the one of the patients was a man that had infertility issues and had issues with his wife, and that's the second person that we follow. Then we follow less, but still some, the mother of one of the children in the submarine that was okay, and then we follow the mother of another of the children that died. And so yeah, we have a cast of characters that they all have secrets, but we don't know how relevant they are to the case and who did it at the end. And I really liked it. I think it was fast-paced, it was fun, and I really liked it. The other thing that I finished more or less in the weekend, I finished it on Monday, was A House for Mr Biswas by B.S. Naipaul. And this is kind of a Trinidadian classic. So this book follows Mr Biswas throughout his life, and it's kind of funny at the beginning. He's a child, but he's still called Mr Biswas. I really like that detail. And the book is divided based on the different places and different houses that Mr Biswas lives in. And this was published, I think, 1961, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 1961. So yeah, it's quite an old book, but it gives a very complete view of Trinidadian society. And the Mr Biswas is from Indian descent, because in Trinidad there are like a lot of people from Indian descent, a lot of people from Chinese descent, African descent, white descent, European descent. So this book talks a lot about those dynamics, but mostly it focuses, I would say, on the differences in class. So within the Indian society in Trinidad, there is differences in class and then as a society overall, and that was a very interesting look at that. I have to say though, it dragged in parts. It doesn't look as big, but it's 560 pages or so, and I thought it was a bit too long, but yeah, that I found that often with classics that are harder to get through, but overall I really enjoyed it. Then the next thing that I finished is Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. This is a sort of a workbook, and every day it gives you prompts and journaling prompts that provoke some thoughts on you and see how you are supporting the white supremacy and the white the white systems that encourage racism. And I think I said in a vlog at some point that there are some questions that are more relevant than others, and there is certain parts that it's not very often, but there are some parts in which she compares race and culture like they are the same thing, and for me they are very different things. So in that sense I think that was a bit of a misstep, but it's very small things, like and it's mainly in the first couple of days of the journaling prompts, so it's not a very important thing. It bothered me a bit, but it's not important. But overall I think it does a good job. I would also say it's fairly basic in some ways, so just be aware that you're not going to go as deep as you could in certain topics, but yeah, overall I think it's a good exercise that everybody should do, especially white people. It is targeted at white people, so yeah, I think that that is a good thing that we could all benefit from. Then I read Nightingale Point by Luan Goldie, and this is following the events in social lower class apartment building in London, and we follow several characters within the apartment building and their relationships, and then I think it's not a spoiler to say that in the first, I don't know, 50-100 pages, a plane crashes into the building, and all the consequences after that, who dies, who doesn't die, the main focus of the book was on the trauma from the accident and how that affects the relationships in the people that lived in the building. And we follow older woman that is from Filipino descent that is supposed to live with her husband, but her husband is always traveling. Then we follow two brothers that are black and they lost their mother, so they live alone, and one of them is 21 I think and the other one is 15, and their dynamics. And then we follow a white girl that with a very controlling dad that has a relationship with one of the brothers. And then we also follow a man that has learning disabilities, and he used to live in a home, like in a common home, and this was his first independent flat. He still had a lot of help, but this was his first independent flat, and we follow all of them and their dynamics, and I thought it was very fun. It was very interesting, and I also didn't know that it was based on real events. At the end there is an author note that said that this is based on the Blymer accident in Amsterdam in 1992, and also in the Grenfell Tower disaster in London. So it's a bit of a combination of both, because in both cases, even though the reasons why those things happen in those apartment buildings were different, the topics that were raised were about why the government didn't do more to protect those buildings and make sure that those were livable spaces. And although that topic comes up in the book here and there, I think the more prevalent topic of it was what trauma does to you and what trauma does to the relationships. So yeah, it was enjoyable. It was a fast-paced book, and I would recommend. And then the last book I finished yesterday was The Island of Sea Women by Layla Saad, and this follows a family within the women community in Jeju Island in South Korea. It's like on the south of South Korea. From the 1930s until 2000. And so it's more or less, I would say, set in the same timeline as Pachinko. So if you want to know more about that time period in Korea, this might be an interesting book for you. So yeah, this happens in that island, in Jeju Island. They had these communities in which the women were the main providers and the men just took care of the house and the children. And these women, they harvest the fields, but they also dived in the sea for shells and animals that they could eat, and they were renowned for how long they could stay in the water and how deep they could dive. And it's a very dangerous job, so there is always a risk involved in it. But they are proud, strong women. And yeah, I think the main story focuses on, the name is Yo Song. I think was something like that. I am very bad with names. But she was this diver, and she had a good life, and she met another girl, Mija, who was the daughter of a collaborator from the Japanese, and these people are very proudly Korean, so they don't like collaborators with Japan. And they develop a very strong relationship because Mija is an orphan. She doesn't have siblings, and she lives with her aunt and uncle that treat her really badly, so she's kind of adopted into the family, and you see their relation develop, and how when they get married their dynamics change, and how that ends up in the story that we have at the end. And this changes, so one timeline is from the 30s to I think 70s, and then the other timeline is in 2008 when some people from America comes to looking for Yosok and try to talk to her about Mija. And yeah, so that's the main premise of the book, and it explores, of course, a lot of the history of Korea and the horrible things that happened there from the Japanese, from the Second World War, from the Americans afterwards. It's a whole lot of horrible things that happened, but it was an interesting one. I think the writing is just okay, so if you read for the writing, this probably is not the best book you can read, but the plot was really interesting. I loved how these women were always talking about the men, like, oh, you know, everybody knows that men are too weak to do this hard labor, which is often how people talk about women in our society, so that was interesting to see flipped. I liked how the characters develop and how they become fleshed out characters, and how their relationships with each other also developed. I think that the second half of the book, the relationship between Yosok and Mija was a bit stagnant, and I would have loved to see that developed a bit more. But yeah, I think that was the point of the book. Like, without that, the plot would not have worked. So yeah, I overall liked it. I think the ending was a bit Hollywood-like, but overall, the rest of the book, I really liked to learn about these women and how cool they were and the relationship between them. So yeah. And then the thing that I'm reading now, I'm only, well, apart from the Mr, which we all know it's gonna take me a couple more months to finish. What I'm reading is The Starless by Erin Morgenstern. I've started yesterday night. I have like 50 pages into it, so I cannot say much about it, but so far it is about this boy or man that is in university, and he founds this book in the library and doesn't have an author, and it is not registered in the system, so he's kind of confused and intrigued about the book, and then he starts reading it and realizes that he is in the book. Yeah, and magical things are supposed to happen. So far, I definitely can see the vibes of the Night Circus in this as well, and it's a fast-paced and it's interesting so far. As I said, I'm not very far into it, so we'll see how that goes, but I'm liking it so far. And then next week, I'm not sure what I will read. I think I'm going to for sure start Amnesty by Aravind and Adiga. I have been wanting to start that since I took it from the library, but there were some other things on my list that I had to do first. And then another thing that I don't know if it's gonna happen yet or not, but Kieran from K-Day Books and I were supposed to buddy read The Shadow King by Maaza Mengiste, starting on Monday, but Kieran just became a dad for the second time, so congratulations to him. And so yeah, we might be a bit delayed, but that's still in the cards. And then I think that I'm going to just take a bunch of very short books, because as I said, I was trying to low-key do 30 this month, and I think I have about 10 books left if I want to hit that. So yeah, probably I will pick up a bunch of short books next week. I'll keep you updated on what I do. Let me know if you have read any of these books and if you like them or not, what you thought about them, or if not, let me know what you read this week. I will be very interested to know. And see you in the next video. Bye!